Cosmic horror is a genre that has survived decades of storytelling, and this is in no small part due to the fact that we fear the unknown, and space is quite possibly the biggest unknown we have to wonder about. But while some cosmic horror deals with matters entire universes away, other stories focus on our next door neighbor, the moon. That ominous reflective rock that only comes around when darkness falls. Despite humans already having visited the place, many people remain superstitious of the moon, and this has made it a prime target for horror media such as Apollo 13 or even more recently the ARG Local 58. But today we're not covering any of those, we are covering instead a quite obscure experience I found on Steam that absolutely encapsulated me. And this experience is called We Went Back. Set on a moon base in 2069, you wake up in cryosleep to find the station completely empty. With no clue about what's going on, we spend the game discovering the dark truth that lies in the empty corridors. So the game is obviously inspired by PT because it's kind of just one area that's looped and scary things happen on each loop, but the background story is what's really fascinating here. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Warning. Cryosleep interrupted. Life form detected.
The game begins as our cryopod opens. According to the base, we've been awoken due to the presence of a life form that's been detected. Walking down the curving corridor, we can see a few things. A window to the exterior of the base, although it's pitch black outside. There's a computer terminal that unlocks the exit, however we don't have the password. Up ahead we find a Polaroid camera, and after picking it up we're free to explore the rest of the base. And although small, the facility is made up of a few distinct and very detailed areas. Cryopod storage, observation deck, spacesuit storage, the recreation room, the incubation area, the lab, and the systems room. On our first pass through, everything seems pretty alright, bar the notable lack of people, and passing through this door, we're back to the start. We've just completed lap 1 of the station, and moving into our second, things begin to get a little interesting. Looking at the observation window, we're greeted by something attempting to break through. Going further into the base, the ambience takes on a more sinister growling tone as one of the spacesuits falls from its place, revealing a vent, and interacting with it gives us this stellar moment of horror gameplay. Okay, so I know that in indie horror games, a lot of them rely on loud noises and jump scares to be scary, but this is pretty out of place in this game, so please bear with me, because from here on, it's actually more slow burn horror with creepier things happening instead of just ah! So after meeting Mr. Grabby, we can head inside the vent he was in and find something quite interesting. It's a sealed off room full of vinyl records and sticky notes that have a bunch of symbols on them. These symbols can be seen on this poster stuck to a wall. As well as that, someone has been taking Polaroid pictures of objects around the base that have similar markings on them, and for whatever reason, it looks like they've been assigning letters to the symbols, almost like they're translating them. Looking at the poster, we can see that there's only 4 symbols left to find, but with us honestly having no reason to complete this puzzle, we head out. Entering the rec room, we can take a closer look at the area, and most of the interesting stuff can be found in this corner. On a calendar, we can see that the game takes place in July 2069, and attached to the paper is a little diagram of the base we're on. According to the sheet, the base type is called a torus, and we can see from the diagram that it's located deep within the moon itself. Over by the pool table, we can pick up I don't know what this thing is, but it's got a moon symbol on it. So we snap a photo of it with our camera, and after doing that, we hear the echoes of someone in pain. Probably fine. Moving through the base further, nothing really happens for the rest of the lap except for us receiving another quick visit from our stalker. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention that if you stick around in the cryo storage area, you can hear banging coming from the pod that we emerged from, and interacting with it reveals an almost charred looking person inside. Heading through the blast door, we enter our third lab. However, this one begins a little differently. Instead of starting in the cryo storage room, we instead enter a seemingly endless incubation chamber. Finding a severed hand, we can once again find a symbol on it, and snapping a photo allows us to exit the area. On lap 4, things truly begin to take a turn. Right off the bat, the base seems messier than before, and the ominous droning has once again returned. But it's not until we reach the rec room that we find the source of the overbearing atmosphere. Standing there in the open is our stalker. His legs are disproportionately long and it almost looks as if he lacks skin. There isn't much you can actually do here, and believe me, I tried not to go near that thing. I tried to solve the puzzle, I tried to go back the other way, but there's nothing you can do and there's nowhere you can go. Entering the rec room, the being simply watches you wherever you move. Lacking options, we do the last thing we want to and approach it. But strangely, it doesn't hurt us, simply screaming before running away. Moving onwards, we can observe the damage done to the station in more detail, but overall there's not much left to do other than enter the next lap. On our 5th lap, we once again enter an infinite hallway, this time of the lab, and upon locating our moon symbol, we're again able to leave. After this, there's nothing overly special about the next lap either. The base is a bit colder, the calendar displays the date of February 1600, and this poster is now of an X-rayed individual screaming. You know, boring lab stuff, yeah. Heading through the loop door again has us in an infinite systems room, and the object we're meant to find is none other than a human eye that's been stabbed with a pencil. Taking a photo of the symbol on the back, we've finally found the last piece of the puzzle we need, and entering lap 8, the dread-inducing atmosphere has disappeared, replaced with an eerie sense of calm. Following the source of the music, we enter the vent room, finding a golden record with what looks like letters carved into its surface. Using the record with the poster on the wall, we discover that it's a cipher to translate the symbols, and completing the puzzle, the final phrase is revealed to be futile. Discovering the phrase, suddenly a fire starts, and upon attempting to exit the vent, we find that the cover has been reattached. Looking through it, a pair of astronaut boots walk past, and heading out of the shaft after them, we enter the rec room, finding it to be on fire. Nearby, a crew member lays pinned to the wall by pool cues. In the incubation chamber, another member with their hand missing. And finally, in the systems room, an astronaut lays with a pencil sticking out of his helmet. Moving for the exit, we're ambushed by an astronaut on fire and strangled to death.
Warning, life form detected.
Once again, we wake up in the cryopod. Everything is back to normal, and yet it's clear that nothing here is normal. With the phrase futile fresh on our minds, we make our way to the computer we had no password for, and entering the code, the doors to the outside open, bringing the game to a close. So you might be thinking, well, that makes no sense, and you'd be completely right, because I don't know if it's obvious here or not, but the story that you're shown in the game is not actually the story that they're telling you. But don't worry, because all of the clues are there. Well, actually there's way too many clues to really figure it out, so we're gonna have to come up with a, oh yeah, you know what it is, a theory. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Interactive Entertainment Hypothesis, and today we are covering We Went Back. So to weave together our story, the first thing we need to establish is that the world of We Went Back is not the same as our own. During different points in the game, we can go to the Recreation Lounge to find a newspaper from 1969 celebrating the landing of the Apollo 11 mission. There are two variants of this newspaper that you can see on different loops. One tells of how Apollo 11 was was a failure, with the crew running out of air, and the other newspaper celebrating the landing of Apollo 14, also in 1969. It's a little hard to tell what's real and what's not with these newspapers, but taking them literally means that Apollo 11 did land, but the mission was a failure when everybody suffocated. However, in this universe, the failure did not temper the US. Instead, their missions to the moon became more frequent. It's because of this that a new player enters the story here. With space exploration being a much more common thing in this alternate history, a corporation was established in 1976 named Luna, which may have outright replaced or had a heavy hand in NASA's operations. I hold this theory because of the golden record that we find near the end of the game. And here's some fun facts for you. This golden record is real. That's right. 2 of these records were made and stowed aboard the 2 Voyager probes that launched in 1977. The records contained music and sounds and information about humanity in case extraterrestrial life were to ever find the probe. Due to the Luna Corporation cropping up in 1976 and the Voyager probes launching in 1977 with a payload that shows up in the game, I feel like it's too big a detail to pass by. With the game taking place in 2069, we can see the Luna logo all over the base, leading me to think that space travel and research began being dominated by the corporations in the late 70s. Moving away from the alternate history aspect, there's a strange theme of repetition in the game. The character travels the same stretch of station over and over again. The tragedy of the entire crew perishing on the moon is shown to have happened before with Apollo 11, and the weirdest part is that our character dies in the same way that a historical scientist of the same name dies. Let me explain. In the rec room, if we take a look at the lockers of each crewmate, we can see the names Bruno, Cavendish, Leo, and Hook. And all of these names are either the first or last names of famous scientists. Bruno is Giordano Bruno, Cavendish is Henry Cavendish, Leo is Leonardo da Vinci, and Hook is Robert Hooke. Personally, I believe the game takes place from Bruno's perspective, and the main reason I believe this is due to the ending of the game, with the base being set on fire and the entire crew perishing. In real life in the 1600s, Giordano Bruno was executed for his belief that infinite inhabited worlds existed in the universe. The method of execution was being burned at the stake. Giordano's death date even appears on this calendar at some points in the game, and this once again feeds into the history repeating itself theme. Another piece of the puzzle is a little more cosmic horror related than the others. On the whiteboard in the lab area, there's binary present, and if we throw this into a translator, we get the return, "The sacred geometry knows all." And what is the sacred geometry? Well, after a bit of thinking and digging, I believe it's a torus. In the game, the station we're on is in the shape of a torus. The moon symbols in the chart revolves around a torus. The record that's returned to us is in the torus shape, if you stretched it out and smushed it, but you get the point. Even your very eye is in the shape of a torus if you were looking at it from above, which in a move by the developers is probably intentional. We can find another moon symbol on this eyeball in the game. Finally, before we move into the actual theory section, we need to talk about the monster, and I'll say that I don't think it's actually real. Through the game, it only shows up to scream at us a few times, and even at the point that it has the perfect opportunity to kill us, all it does is run off. And the only time the creature actually kills us is if you miss a moon symbol while walking around. And a little detail is that the animation it uses when dropping from the ceiling is the same one that the astronaut uses when you're attacked at the end of the game, so I honestly don't really think it's real. So for this theory, I'm working off the premise that this game borrows pretty heavily from the PT, and you're a pretty bad dude who's in limbo, discovering why he's there all over again. So using this frame of thought and the clues we have, I think that the timeline goes something like this. Bruno was the head researcher of the base, and one day he was out in the cavern that the base was built in, and he stumbled across the golden record with symbols etched into it. Considering that the Voyager probes had gone out nearly a century earlier, his mind began to wander, and Bruno became obsessed with deciphering the code. Over the next few days, he became paranoid, seeing an alien-looking entity around the ship. In reality, these are just hallucinations, and at some point he sees his own crewmates as the creature, with a fight breaking out. This would explain the rotation where the creature pounces on you, yet does nothing to hurt you. After this, Bruno becomes convinced that the base has been overrun, and decides to set it ablaze. And during our final final visit to the vent room, I actually believe that we take control of a different crew member or see from their point of view. This would be the crew member that Bruno hallucinated as the alien and had a fight with, since we saw it run in this direction. Coming in here to hide, our protagonist would have finally discovered what sent Bruno over the edge. The coded message of the moon itself translates to futile. Perhaps Bruno translated this as some sort of threat and went crazy, or became insanely paranoid, or maybe is actually being influenced by something that was in the cavern. Either way, it doesn't matter. Looking out of the vent, we can see Bruno walking past, and following his trail of dead bodies, he jumps out and kills the last member of the base. I then think that Bruno put himself into cryosleep where he burned to death. This would explain why we wake up in the cryopod and why we see a charred corpse screaming inside our pod on the third rotation. Waking up in the cryopod once again, everything is back to normal, and now that Bruno has realized what he's done, he can use the word that sent him over the edge as a password to the exit, leaving his personal hell behind. So this second theory is kind of out there, and it didn't really come to me until I kind of finished writing this script and I had to look over everything and realize that there's a lot more cosmic stuff going on in the game than it originally seems. Pretty much the theory follows the same line as the last theory. Bruno finds the golden record in the cavern and is somehow exposed to the knowledge that history is repeating itself. 100 years earlier, Apollo 11 ran out of air and the crew died. But did the shuttle run out of air, or was it sabotaged? Could someone on Apollo 11 have witnessed something that drove them crazy, that drove them to kill the rest of their crew? In this theory, I'm gonna say they did, and Bruno was made aware that he is destined to do the same to his crew. Although Bruno tried to prevent the events, something was nudging him closer to bringing them into being. He began hallucinating that his crewmates were hideous creatures, and after attacking one of his co-workers, Bruno decided to seal himself away in cryosleep. Waking up suddenly, he was back in the base. Discovering it was empty, he began exploring, and reaching the loop around door at the end of the hall, things seemed to almost reset. Finding the record room over time, Bruno began realizing that the only way out was through the airlock, but it needed a password. Through some jump in logic, Bruno started documenting the moon crescent symbols all around the base. He figured they were a code, and in the main game we can see hundreds of sticky notes all attempting to relate these symbols to words. I can imagine Bruno trying countless passwords to the door just to figure out single letters. After enough repetitions, Bruno figured out 2 letters of 6 symbols, but where were the rest of them? Like in the game, our protagonist must have witnessed his future slaughter of the crew and then being killed, resetting the world back to 0. This is where our game starts, and as we saw in the ending, the password we figured out was the word futile. But what does this all mean? Well, I believe this was the entity showing Bruno the inevitability of history. Bruno was destined to repeat history as it had been repeated so many times before. Events through history occurring again and again. One Bruno burns hundreds of years ago, a Bruno burns now. A space crew is murdered, a space crew is murdered. Repeat, repeat. Bruno walks around the moon base multiple times, repeating multiple scenarios, walking in circles, repeating his previous path, like a spinning record, like history, like Bruno traversing the base. They all go in circles, and it's futile to go in any other way. I believe that somehow before the game begins, Bruno received a glimpse of the architecture of the universe, and he doesn't like it. For the entire game, he attempts to escape his destiny, and to do so, he has to witness that destiny firsthand multiple times, and even use clues from the future to escape his loop. The password being futile, I think, is the universe or some entity teaching Bruno a lesson. Just by figuring out the password, Bruno will have been shown that this will happen no matter what, and entering the password is him accepting that. I believe that after Bruno exits the station in the game, he wakes up in the cryopod once more in the real world. But now he's finally ready, or quite possibly insane enough, to carry out his destiny. So yeah, those are my 2 theories. One is a little more grounded, and the other is a little more cosmically scaled. If I'm being honest, I think that the truth actually lies somewhere in between, and I'm just not smart enough to figure it out because both have pretty big holes in each of them. Overall, I do think that there's a cosmic level entity interfering with Bruno's either perception of reality or time or both. And I don't think that those weird, tall, skinless thingies are actually real. I think that the truth is a lot more subtle. But at the end of the day, I don't think that it matters, and I don't think we're going to get any answers, and I'd be surprised if there is a definitive answer, because this is cosmic horror, and knowing the horror is, well, that doesn't really fit the mold. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching the video. I'm actually looking to cover more indie games because I'm kind of looking to branch out. I don't want to just play games that I know and do retrospectives on games I know. I want to learn about new worlds and have new experiences. So if you have something you want me to play, let me know and I might play it. Anyway, that's all for today. I will see you later.